Alright, so today we're going to finish up 10.1 talking about relative frequency. And frequency is how often something occurs. Okay? How often something occurs or happens. Basically, relative frequency is probability. It's the same thing. Probability. Okay? I think I spelled that right. Maybe. Thank you. Okay. So we can set up relative frequency as a fraction or a percent, because we know we can convert a fraction to a percent. In the world of fractions, we have our numerator on top and our denominator on the bottom. The numerator represents part, while the bottom represents whole. And that's the same case here. We're talking about relative frequency. The numerator is the number of times the event happens or occurs, whereas the denominator is the total number of times you conducted the experiment. And we see this played out in this example right here in example 3, where they're talking about the bottle flip. You know, y'all tried the whole bottle flip experiment trying to make it land upright. So here we have a bottle flip, and they flipped it and recorded whether it landed upright or on its side. And they want us to describe the likelihood that the bottle will land upright on the next flip. Now I know just looking at this frequency table here, you can look and tell, are you likely to land upright based off of this results? No, it's unlikely. Okay? You can just look and tell that this is unlikely to happen. But you can have the math to back it up. And that's where the relative frequency or the probability comes in. You can look at, because we're talking about lands upright, you're going to look at the number of flips that land upright compared to the total number of flips that you did. So how many landed upright? 2 landed upright out of a total of 25 flips. You're going to convert that fraction to a percent, which gives you, if you punch it in your calculator, you have to hit the second button and hit the parentheses button, and it'll give you 8%. Now, based on our diagram from yesterday, okay, 8% is going to fall under which of these categories? Unlikely. The only way you can get impossible is if it is what? And the only way you can get for certain is, and the only way you get equally likely is if it is 50%. So if it's less than 50%, it's unlikely. If it's greater than 50%, it is likely to happen. So since 8% falls under the 50%, it's unlikely that you are going to land the bottom upright. Okay? Now I could use this percentage also to predict how many times it will land upright in a future experiment. So if I looked right here, for example, 8% of them landed upright, correct? What if I said, okay, well that's in 25 flips. What about in 75 flips? How many will land upright? How could I figure that out? So you're essentially setting up a proportion, okay? Or you're setting up a percent box, because we're dealing with a percent, and anytime we answer percent questions, we can use a percent box where 100 is always in here. We're talking about an 8% probability. We're looking at a part to whole situation. If I were to flip it 75 times based off of the 8% probability, how many times should it land upright? So we would cross multiply and divide. You would get what? It should land 6 times upright 6 times. Okay? Listen. Right. If this trend holds true, okay, let's say that this trend holds true and it stays the same, then you should go 6. So, like, if I had to guess and make an estimate and be like, I bet you $100 that if you can guess how many times you'll land it upright in 75 flips, and you did the math, you should be around 6 if the odds are, if you stick to the same odds. But yes, there is always the outside factor of, that's the point of probability. You can't guarantee it, but you can try. It's like an estimated guess. Good point. All right, so on the back, we're talking about shooting 3-point shots. Okay? So this is Presley in the basketball games. Okay? Because she's the only one in here that actually plays basketball. And she recorded her shots. Okay? And it's tallied in the frequency table here. We want to know what's the likelihood that she makes the next shot and what's the likelihood that she doesn't make the next shot. So we would set up the relative frequency or the probability. We would look, we're looking for making the shot. So the number of shots she makes over the total number of shots that were taken. How many times did she make it? 9 times. Out of how many? 15. Out of the total number of shots taken, 15. I'm glad you said that because some people would. Alright, and then we're going to change it to a percent. So 9/15 as a percent is 60%. So what is the likelihood of Presley making the next shot? Alright, that's the probability. Likelihood is unlikely, likely, certain, impossible. She's likely to make it. So we could put money on Presley making the next shot. We're not gambling here, but okay. Alright, so in part B, now we're like, okay, well, what's the likelihood of her missing the next shot? Okay, so, well, how many did she miss? How many? She missed 6 out of the 15, which as a percent is converted to 40%. Well, that would make sense, right? If it's out of 100%, we've already used 60 for making, then that leaves 40% for missing. So 40% is what kind of likelihood?
Like maybe
Unlikely. You got to go based off the diagram. If it's less than 50, it's unlikely. If it's more than 50, it's likely. If it's 100%, it's certain. If it's exactly 50, it's equal because it's a 50-50 shot. 50% you will make it, 50% you won't make it. Okay? Alright, in our next example, a bag contains only red marbles and blue marbles. You randomly draw a marble from the bag and replace it. The table shows the result of repeating this experiment. Find the likelihood of each event. So what is the likelihood that the next marble she draws is red? So what are we comparing here? What are we going to put in our fraction?
Right.
Every time we
Red to
do
total.
over the total, part to whole, red to total. Okay, so we're going to put the red over the total amount. So how many red marbles are there? Or how many times does she pick a red marble? 21 times. Out of how many times does she draw it?
42.
So 21 over 42 converted to a percent
It's 50.
gives me 50%. What's the likelihood? That's the probability. Okay? That's the relative frequency or the probability. What is the likelihood?
Equal to 50.
It's 50-50, right? So we're equal likely to have it. Alright, part B. The next marble you choose is neither red or blue.
0%.
In the bag, there's only what colors?
Red and blue.
Red and blue. That's what the instructions say. So if I can't pick red and I can't pick blue, then there's a 0% chance I'm pulling anything else. There's 0 outcomes for that. So if it's 0%, then it's impossible to pull a green or a yellow or a pink or whatever color else that's not red or blue. Indigo. Getting specific over here. Alright, we're going to do something similar to this here in a minute. You roll a number cube and record the number of times you roll an even number and the number of times you roll an odd number. Describe the likelihood of each event. So I want you to find the relative frequency for both of these, and then I want you to find the likelihood of both of those. Go for it. Alright, how many times did we roll an even number? 26 out of a total of 50, which gave me a percent of,
52.
so what is that likelihood? Likely. And then how many times did we roll an odd? 24 over 50, which gives me a percent of, which is a likelihood of, okay? Alright, that's as far as we're going on that side. Okay, if you just look at this for a second, alright, we rolled it 50 times. What if I'm going to roll it 300 times? Okay? What is the likelihood of rolling, based off of this information, what's the likelihood of rolling an odd number if you're going to do it 300 times? Or what's the probability? Or what's the relative frequency? It would still be, so originally I rolled 24 out of 50 times. right? Well, now I'm rolling 300 times. What's the percent? What's the number on top going to be there?
144.
What? 144. So 144 times would the number be odd. So I would end up with 144 over 300. What is that? Is a relative frequency? It converts to 48%, which is still unlikely. But if I wanted to know how many rolls would be odd, what would the answer be? 144 rolls would be odd. Okay. So in just a second, we're going to conduct an experiment where you're going to get to roll a number cube, and you're going to find the relative frequency and answer some questions based off of that. And then you're going to get to flip a penny and do some relative frequency based off of that. And then when we finish the experiment, you can work on your homework, and then we're done for the day. Okay? Sound good? Awesome.